Consumer expectations have never been higher. But with the evolving economic and competitive pressures, it's getting harder for brands to deliver the kind of consistent, compelling experiences that keep customers loyal. Can operations and facilities leaders find ways to meet these demands while growing their footprint and ultimately drive revenue? Let's find out. Welcome to Elevating Brick and Mortar, a show that discusses the crucial role that facilities, construction, and operations play in designing and delivering a compelling customer experience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season 5 of Elevating Brick and Mortar. Thank you for joining us. I am here today with Christopher Gumprecht, VP of Marketing and Information Technology at Craveworthy Brands. Christopher, welcome.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
And we're excited to have you on as well. So Chris, for listeners who may not be familiar with your brand, can you share a little bit more about Craveworthy Brands and the vision behind the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are relatively new to the space, but filled with a lot of veteran restaurant folks. We started in 2022 by acquiring a handful of brands, and we've grown to now we have about 20 brands in the portfolio, and we'll continue to grow. Craveworthy's goal really is to strengthen brands without stripping away things that make them special. So as we bring them into the Craveworthy family, we're always looking for something that's very unique about the brand and fun.
Great. So did you start off by acquiring a few brands and then building a brand of like Craveworthy Brands around it? Or did you start some open new concepts as well?
Yeah, everything that we've done has all been through acquisition. So it started with some of our more legacy brands, and then even in the last year, we've acquired a couple of larger ones like Big Chicken, Dirty Dough, and Gregory's Coffee.
You have a few different brands, right? Are they all corporate owned, or do you have franchisees as well, or is it a mix?
It varies by brand, which I feel like has been my constant message here. But we have a couple of brands that are all corporate owned right now, but we are in the process of working out franchising on those. We talk a lot about creating restaurant success stories. That's like one of our goals as an organization. And that comes from promoting someone from a shift lead to a GM or et cetera, but also comes from building an environment that our franchisees can win and succeed. And so we want to continue to grow that part of our business because they are important to us.
And when you look at the brands in your portfolio, is there any underlying theme that maybe made them attractive to you during that acquisition phase? And, I guess what is the approach you're looking to have in terms of customer experience and the North Star of the brand, if you may?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And, when it comes to legacy brands, we're looking for opportunities to revitalize them. We're not looking to rebuild things from scratch. We're looking for something that exists already in that brand that we just need to kind of chip away to get back to what it was. And on the other side of it, we're really looking for emerging brands that we can take and help scale. We have a shared service model internally. So when people engage with ops or tech or marketing, that those services are shared across all of our brands so that we can help bring expertise to a lot of those things. When it comes to like third-party contracts, right, we can automatically give smaller brands a better playing field to work with by helping get more strategic commission rates, or we could do the same thing on the chicken side. But I think the opposite side of it is we've had some smaller brands that have done things really well that we stop and say, hey, that's really unique. How can we go apply this to more brands or to the rest of the portfolio? So it's really nice to have that synergy between how we're acquiring them.
I found it really interesting that you're not just taking a specific kind of cuisine and then coming up with different concepts around it. You have a portfolio of a variety of cuisines in your portfolio. Is that essentially what the underlying North Star was when it was first formed?
I think that vision's probably come into perspective a lot more as we've gone along and we've started to have opportunity to talk to some of these other brands that we've included in the portfolio. It was initially looking at an opportunity to create a landscape that was more competitive for businesses and particularly for franchisee owners. Big Chicken is a great example. It's a brand that we have that we partner with Shaquille O'Neal. There's so much fun in that brand that you just can't recreate, right? Like it's so organic as part of it. And we're fortunate enough that we get to play in that space. Dirty Dough is another great example where like there's no way to replicate the joy on someone's face when they walk in and see these like over decorated cookies that are just so gluttonous and joyful. And those are things that we're always looking for is like that. What's that something that's really unique about the brand that we can bring in?
I love it. Now let's talk about you a little bit, right? I love talking to my guests about their journey and how they got here, right? So you've had a very unique journey. You've been in operations and learning and development, marketing, IT, and software.
The too long didn't read version of it is that I'm just a big nerd. Like at my core, I'm a nerd about everything, right? Whether it comes to marketing or technology or the things in my personal life. Like I just have this like level of passion that I try to make sure is a little bit contagious. And that's kind of followed me throughout my career. So I was really, really fortunate to start as a part-time server at a restaurant in Chicago. Spent the first few years in restaurant operations, really working in like as a bartender and server and doing a little bit of training. And then I moved into a full-time training and development role, which is kind of core to who I am as a leader, right? Like when I think about how I'm going to approach something, a lot of times it's coming from that training background. And I did that for about 7 years. And then I got really bored, which is what happens to me all the time is I need something new to kind of entertain myself. And I started to dabble a little bit into point of sale. And we didn't have anyone that was managing point of sale for the organization. And so they created a role for me to do that. I spent about 7 years in IT managing point of sale. And then I flipped over to the marketing side because and this was kind of right at the crux of when technology and marketing were really facing this intersection. We would have projects in marketing that would either kick off too early or too late with IT involvement. And so I was supposed to be kind of like the liaison that I could say, hey, IT is probably not going to approve that, or you're not thinking about it this way. So if we're going to start this project, we need to do that. And it really developed into a much more guest-facing technology role. And so I became kind of the in-house marketing technology person.
Oh, interesting.
And it was a blast. I'm so fortunate. Let Us Entertain You is such an entrepreneurial place, and that was how my entire career was in that organization.
I mean, it's fascinating to think about this intersection of marketing and technology, and the way you put it was great, which is technology that is influencing the customer experience and customer facing. It's not necessarily a role that a lot of people have out there, right? What competitive advantage does it give you in the role that you have across two very important functions?
This is like my favorite question to answer. And I think traditionally, if we were looking at 10 years ago, a lot of IT people were just really focused on IT and marketing was very focused on marketing. But I think today the best marketing people are people who are really kind of tech savvy, right? And true IT leaders should be the people that are also thinking about marketing implications when we're looking at solutions. And I've worked with a lot of traditional IT folks over the years who are just they want to be in their armchair making decisions from behind a computer screen. And in the restaurant space, that just doesn't work. Going back to my career journey, one of the reasons that I took the opportunity to leave and I went to a company called Roti was because as much as I loved what I was doing, I was out of the restaurants most of the time. I was in office space and meeting at our corporate office, and I just missed being in the restaurants. And so my next role gave me the opportunity that I spent most of my time in the restaurant solving problems. And so now in my current role, trying to wear two hats at the same time. And I have to keep myself in check too, because I have to make sure I don't lean too far in one direction or the other. Sometimes, if I'm thinking about security and compliance, I have to make sure that I'm not doing that too far, that it's at a detriment of something from a marketing piece that could drive sales. And how do we find a balance in that? So it's a constant struggle for me, but it's one that I love doing.
Was it always your plan to be in hospitality, or did it happen organically when you just first started in the restaurant space?
So restaurants run in my family. My sister and I have been in restaurants all our life.
Okay.
I wouldn't be in restaurants without her. She actually got my first serving job. She was a manager at a restaurant, and I was a terrible server, by the way. I was I look back on like my first 6 months, and I don't know how they kept me on. But it's just I love the energy. I love the immediacy of the things that you can solve, even from a technology perspective, right? Like you think about healthcare or finance, and when you're solving technology problems, your end user might be so far away from you. Here, I can go develop a new feature for an app and immediately go see how it affects guests in the restaurant or the team members there.
I love it.
So I don't think I could have ended up anywhere else.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You've built this brand, right? And then you look at like the consumer space and all the different restaurants and concepts that are out there, it probably is a really tough time when it comes to capturing consumer mind share and their attention. What, in your view, is one of the biggest areas that you're focusing on to kind of set Craveworthy apart?
Yeah, this is like the $1 million question, right? Is we're in such a competitive space right now because there's more fast casual brands out there than there've ever been.
Right.
And there's more of them filing bankruptcy every day too, right? We open our browsers and every day I feel like I read a new one. And so trying to find your space in the field of places that people have to eat, to me, it really comes down to how restaurants shape daily routines for people, right? And finding moments that matter. And people could choose to eat anywhere, right? They can choose to eat at a restaurant. Why choose to eat out versus eating at home? And so I think when we're looking at ways that we can build stronger relationships with our customers, it isn't just about how many marketing campaigns can we get out there. It's about how many relationships we can build with our customers and creating a place that, whether it's Gregory's Coffee and they come to us 1 time a week for coffee or 6 times a week, or they come to a fast casual chicken brand once every 3 weeks. Like, how do we create that routine that it is easy for them, that we're reliable and we're giving them a consistent experience? Because that's what people will pay for.
Yeah. What makes a brand in the restaurant space? Like, you've got, of course, the food, right? Then you've got the physical experience. Like, what does it feel like to walk into a space? Like, what does it take to create a brand, especially when it's so young in its nascent years, right?
It's interesting. So when I was at Lettuce, we would do, and this was full service, but we would, as we were doing restaurant openings and practices beforehand, we would stop and set up the entire dining room and have everyone sit in it so that it felt full and we could see what the customer experience actually felt like, rather than just people running around trying to do tastings and explain what service was supposed to be. The in-store experience of that is really important. Brand identity is all about finding consistency, right? Making sure that your messaging is consistent in your marketing efforts, that it's consistent when it's executed by operations, when people walk in the door or they're coming in to pick up a online order. That brand has to follow you all the way through. Right. Otherwise, people are going to feel disconnected from it, because it is disconnected. So I think that the most important piece, on top of reliability and consistency, the one additional piece I'll say in there is listen to your customers, because oftentimes we would create a brand and we think that's what the brand is. Yeah. But your customers will always tell you what the brand actually is, and you've got to listen to that and take that feedback and figure out how to create messaging around that.
You don't really understand always how customers feel about your brand, because sometimes you just take it for granted, right? Mm-hmm. Especially as you're like in the younger years, are you seeing like different brands have a different identity and a different type of customer that's walking in? And do you guys do studies on like, what do they really care about when they walk into our space? Like, why do they walk into our space?
Yeah, and it's interesting because some brands that we acquire have more of that developed than others, right? Some, and some grow their brand through really short, like, bursts of brand identity pieces, and other ones have just fallen into a routine. It's always about getting feedback from customers first, right? Making sure that we understand what their expectations of us are. And then kind of going back to my message from the beginning too, is like chiseling away at the things that aren't important to figure out the real brand identity. The comment that you made about, that kind of recent rebrand logo reminds me of like what happened to the Gap back in the early 2000s. Right. And they introduced that whole new logo, and 3 days later they turned it back. And I think that's just, it's missing opportunity from feedback from your customers, or, getting into a focus group and you hear one thing, you've got to validate that those things are true.
That's right. Now, our show is all about the physical space, the physical built environment, and a lot of the folks in our audience are folks that work in functions that support or serve that part of the business, right? How important is it for the physical space to represent the brand in the best possible way? How do you work with those teams that every day are looking to kind of create and preserve the experience for the consumer?
our entire executive team spends a majority of our time in the restaurants, right? We're always trying to solve problems or drive initiatives from within the four walls rather than just sitting in a boardroom someplace making these decisions. When you start to look at smaller restaurant operators, right, trying to find that consistency between all of your locations.
Yeah.
And then where can you find opportunities and touch points within that? As soon as they walk in their door, follow that customer through from when they walk in your door to when they're looking at your digital menu boards. Do I understand what the path through the restaurant looks like? Where are their bottlenecks? Behind the line, right? Do I have my station set up in the right place? Am I always putting my cucumbers in the same 6-pan in the same place, or does that change every day? Is the cash wrap station set up to maximize throughput there, right? Or are we having a bottleneck? And so understanding that entire experience from the customer perspective is to me probably the most important part.
Now, when we were speaking earlier, you also mentioned that you're particularly passionate about off-premise catering, and both as a revenue channel, but also like to create an experience and another connection point for the consumer. Why does that excite you?
So I was really fortunate in my last organization when I was at Roti. We were a really small team, and we had a very, very strong catering business. It was 20 to 25% of our overall sales volume came from off-premise catering.
Wow.
There's a whole team that was set up to help with that. We had some change in leadership, and we needed some place for that team to report to, and so they ended up reporting to me, even though I was running IT. And it helped me think about solving problems from a different lens, right? One of the problems that I saw right away is I would walk into a restaurant and I'd watch an employee spend 30 minutes labeling carryout boxes by hand. And I was like, wow, why are they spending, that is just too long. And the POS system wasn't set up to build labels at that output. We had an internal engineer, so he had been working on our website, and I had him work on a side project to go build a solution for that, and we put in a label printer, and it started printing off tickets, and we were saving 30 minutes of valuable time for employees in the morning. So when I look at growing third-party sales business, especially from a marketing perspective, and this is one of the things that I love about Craveworthy, is like I have this vision for us of creating a almost like a marketplace for catering business in markets that our brands are saturated in. How cool would it be one day that there's an office admin that could look at a catalog of all Craveworthy brands, and you can order from a different place every day, and you get the same level of experience. You get the same great food quality, the delivery, it's going to be white glove. And taking it a step deeper in that too is understanding that your customer on the catering side is so much different than the non-catering customer. Those people might be people who aren't even in your market, right? If you're in a place like New York, you might have an admin who's sitting in another state and they're placing orders for people. So, offering them a loyalty program that they're going to be able to redeem rewards for that brand and there isn't a location close to them might not be helpful. So as you're thinking about what does loyalty look like, do you need a separate loyalty program just for your catering business? Is that beneficial? Do you understand what drives those people? But I could spend all day talking about the catering business.
Now, restaurants that went through COVID and then came out on the other side, realized that their customers were interacting with them differently now, right? There was a significant rise in drive-throughs, so restaurants began building more drive-throughs. There's a significant increase in third-party apps, and so restaurants began building or expanding the kitchen so that they could manage the in-room dining plus any new third-party orders that were coming in. How's it been for Craveworthy? I mean, you didn't go through COVID. Your brand started post-COVID. So did you feel like when the brand started, it already had like a bunch of things that they knew they should take care of with the evolution of consumer demands and how they're engaging with the brands? Or do you feel like you still had to go through the process to see how your customers wanted to engage with you and your concepts?
Time is a great example. It's a Mediterranean fast casual brand that we have that's primarily in the New York market. Very small footprint for those locations. There is an opportunity for drive-through there, but we rely very heavily on third-party and digital orders. And then we have brands like Big Chicken that are really built on drive-through capacity, and so making sure that we're designing new stores. There's a couple components to that we can build something that makes sense from a financial perspective to be able to facilitate that drive-through, but also make sure that you can execute, right? Because the key to drive-through is making sure that you can get people in and out so much faster than if they were in store. And if you have a brand that, like, it takes you 7 or 8 minutes to fulfill an order, does drive-through make sense for you? Even if you can do it, does that make sense? We have the opportunity to be on so many different systems and platforms to meet our customers. You got to make sure that you're executing correctly on any one that you choose before you add all of them. Because it's, at the end of the day, that customer, if they're having a negative experience, they're not going to come back, and that channel becomes useless.
That's right. That's right. That's very interesting. I mean, you have to have a type of cuisine that actually fits in the drive-through model. How much does technology solve some of the challenges around wait times, and maybe even whether your assets are always functioning in the optimal way? Because you might have the right kind of cuisine to serve in drive-throughs. And how do you think about leveraging technology to maybe have AI in your drive-throughs? Like, does it work? And then also, like, how do you kind of ensure that every single revenue generating asset, every single asset that creates either a better experience, in terms of, comfort for your customers, or is actually used to deliver the food, is always running and functioning as intended?
I think I probably make people crazy in the business internally because I'm always the KPI guy, right? Like, people come to me internally all the time and they're like, oh, we got to solve this problem. Can you go find us something to go solve this? Or I need this kind of data. And I'm always like, okay, well, why are we asking that question? What are we trying to get at under there? If we're going to go do a pilot of something, right? If we're looking to solve drive-through wait times and understand that, or understand order fulfillment times, and we want to go leverage some piece of technology to do that, what's the return on that, and what's the real value? How do we decide if that's a success or not? Because and this is me, I work with plenty of other technology people that don't always feel this way. I'm very G&A focused. I do not like to spend money on technology unless absolutely necessary. So I think I drive salespeople a little crazy with that too, because I'm a very hard sell. But there are key pieces of the business that I will look at to solve things, right? If I can find a piece of technology that's going to drive sales, I will always look at that first rather than some automated dishwasher that's going to, no offense to automated dishwashers out there, but like an automated dishwasher that's going to remove labor hours from the kitchen. So I think we need to be really strategic about the things that we have out there. On the flip side too, the salespeople, who are always lovely, I think it's really important that they understand the problems that they're trying to solve in a restaurant. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a call from an operator who's like, hey, I just got a phone call from this salesperson. It sounds really interesting, and I think we should do it. And then I'll talk to him and I'll just start to unpack it. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't, like, you don't integrate with the system, or we need this piece of it. So from a technology perspective, I try to be very conservative in my approach, unless it's going to do something that drives sales.
Figuring out, like, if technology actually is helping you or is a distraction, right? But it also ties very much to the labor and human capital that's available to run a restaurant. What's your perspective on that? Like, is it tougher today to get people to work in restaurants, and that's kind of forcing brands to think about, augmentation versus, I guess, replacement, right? Augmentation of human capital with robotics and and AI, or you feel like labor is available, it's just that how we engage them is probably needing some changes, right?
This is a tough one because in a lot of ways the work hasn't changed. I think the expectations around the work have changed. And there are pieces of the business that have become more complicated for our restaurant operators, right? I think back to, like, way back when I was working in restaurants, and to do a line check, I just grabbed a clipboard and I'd go through and I'd temp stuff and I'd mark it off on the clipboard and then go file that away. Now it has to be done on a tablet, and I've got to take photos of things, and then all of that gets reported, and then that affects my bonus. And so we've complicated so much of the work. And for a lot of the workforce, right, these are people who may be entry-level jobs. We're asking them to do a lot of things that are that we weren't asking people to do 10 years ago. So figuring out how we get the workforce to a place that they can successfully do their job without weighing down with a lot of activities or unnecessary behaviors, I think is the key part of that. Leveraging AI to do some of these things, right? Like, I think one of the clearest places to go solve things in a restaurant is inventory with AI, right? Is being able to keep better track than someone could who's just looking through a spreadsheet and find opportunities in a restaurant of like, hey, your cost on dry goods is too high here, or your sauces, like something's off in this reporting. We need to go dig into this. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity in that. The piece that you said that I think is the part that I think about a lot is not using AI to replace people, right? Not using technology to replace people. I love kiosks. I think they're a place for kiosks in our business, and there's a lot of people who enjoy using kiosks. I personally don't love the idea of a all kiosk restaurant. And maybe that works in some businesses. That's just not, to me, that defeats the purpose of going to a restaurant, right? Where you're taken care of, where there's an element of interaction between people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you said it right. I mean, people today, I think, crave interaction more than ever before. They want the human element, right? But they also want choices. They want the choice of being able to order their food on a kiosk if they feel like it. But if they want to go and see someone smile at them and take their order, right? Sure. Has it become difficult to find people to work the front of house or work in the kitchen?
Yeah, and I mean, you take a look at wage studies, right? And I think that has a lot to do with it. I think wages are very stagnant, and finding people to work in these jobs is challenging. And so, I said this kind of at the beginning when I think about marketing and technology. Those are the people that are most important to me because those are the ones who are most connected to the customer. So when I'm looking for feedback, those are the first people I should be going to talk to, right? I want to go talk to the managers in the restaurant or the cashiers and understand what a problem is or what we can go solve. And so keeping those people in their roles and happy and satisfied is important.
You had talked about how Craveworthy has a strong focus on skill development and finding employment pathways for folks, right? Either between your different markets and brands, or even maybe from the restaurants into corporate. Can you talk about that and how you personally and Craveworthy believe in investing in your people?
It goes back to like my training and development days. When I talk about like caring about the people most, that includes my teams, and so I try to be a very hands-on leader with my team. I try to encourage people to make decisions where they can, so that I don't have to. And then trying to figure out how to support each person on my team individually, because everybody needs their own development path. And I can't, even if two people are doing the same job, I can't develop them the same way. And that comes a lot from my background at Lettuce of just being a very entrepreneurial place. I try to take that same approach with my teams. One of the core pieces for me is continual leadership development. And I'm someone who's been very fortunate in my career and grown in ways that I didn't expect, and I've learned a lot. And so I try to spend time giving back to my teams in that same way. So with my teams, we do a monthly leadership development. And when I came on board, I put together, I think it was like a 22-month leadership development plan for my teams that is optional if they want to participate with and they want to get better as leaders. We talk about things like, how do you manage up, right? How do you manage someone who doesn't report to you? How do you give feedback? What does your personal brand as a leader look like? And so we'll spend an hour just talking about these things. And I don't like to lecture, so it isn't me talking. It's me asking questions and facilitating a conversation. And sometimes it might be me giving them a homework assignment by saying, I want you to go out and figure out something that you're really interested in from a leadership perspective, and go listen to a podcast or read a book. And then next month you're going to come back and teach us that leadership piece.
I love it. When you look at the different functions that exist within any restaurant organization or brand, right? Mm-hmm. You probably work closest with, within, of course, the functions you lead, marketing and IT and probably operations, right? But help us understand like how a leader like you works with, facilities and construction and design, teams that, are working behind the scenes, and once the location's up, construction and architecture and design are moving ahead, facilities is maintaining the space, keep that connected tissue to make sure that the physical space is always representing the brand well, and that those folks have a seat at the table as you're looking at what types of technologies to bring in to the spaces and what kind of experiences to create for your customers.
This is like a core tenet of just leadership in general, is it all depends on relationships. I work really, really hard from the moment I walk in a door someplace to develop relationships with everybody throughout the organization. So if facilities is having a problem and tech can solve it, I'm the person they think of to reach out to, and they send me a text or give me a phone call. And this is something that I encourage people. If you work in an organization that has a corporate team, I cannot stress, this is my personal opinion, but I cannot stress enough the importance of spending time in your restaurants.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of people in restaurant leadership before that just want, and I said this before too, like just want to sit behind a desk, but I can't. Here's a great example of how this happened. I'll give you a quick story. When I was working in IT, we had a restaurant that was very high volume, like $80,000 a day in sales. And every day at the same time, their POS would go offline. And we spent months with the point of sale company trying to figure it out, on calls every day. We shipped out a new server. We had a backup server in the rack so that if it went down and we needed to replace it, we could. And it finally came down to the point I wasn't in a high leadership role. I think I was a manager, and I went to my VP at the time and I was like, I need to just go out there. I just need to go out there and sit in the office for a couple of days and just see what's happening. And I went there, sitting there in dinner service, just like doing my work on the computer, and I watched the office door open, and I see a cleaning person come in, and they unplug a cable from the wall, they plug in their vacuum, they start vacuuming, and then unplug it and plug the cable back in.
No way.
There's no way we would have been able to figure this out from a technology perspective, right? I could have never figured that out sitting behind a desk. I had to go into the restaurant and see what was happening. Now that's extreme, right?
Yeah.
But like these are the things that we have to
That's
understand. Right. And so you can't just take a tech or a marketing mindset. You got to think operationally.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, the small things, right? The small things, to your point, you just sit there and notice, and like, that's when you actually realize what's actually happening. You can't do it behind a desk. In our company, we call it going to Gemba, right? So that really resonates with me. I love it. What do you think about all the different technologies that are making its way into the restaurants these days? Do you think that some of these are really, really changing the experience and taking it to a whole new level, and some of them will kind of fall off because they're kind of gimmicky?
It's hard to say right now, right? In some of these regards, we're still in such infancy with it. When it comes to AI, I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about how we are unprepared for the AI revolution that is coming, right? It is going to be bigger than what life was like pre the internet versus post internet. And like those are two very different worlds. And as AI starts to really shape and get to this next level, it's going to have a sociological impact that we're unprepared for as a society. So when I start looking at those integrations of tools with things that we're using every day, we've taken the stance of, like a lot of companies, having an internal AI task force that we're starting to build out in ways that we can use tools responsibly within the organization. But those are shifting. And I also sometimes feel the flip side where, I'll work with a vendor or a partner that I just want their tool to work great, and they're coming to sell this new AI tool that's being integrated in there. So sometimes there's a core part of me that's like, just cut back on the AI and just like, let's go make sure that your tool works the way that it should. But other things like when, robotics being added in or automation tools, I think those are cool. I'm always looking for cutting edge stuff, and the nerd in me is like, oh, how does that work? Let me think about how to dissect that.
Yeah.
It's got to help the customer experience at the end of the day. Whether that's making an employee's job easier, making it easier for a customer to find us, get food, have a great experience, have a consistency. So when I think about robotics, like there's a level of a bit of entertainment to that, but I don't know that there's a real financial benefit in that side of it.
Got it. When you look at all the different brands that you have, how do you maintain consistency in terms of experience, or do you? Right, like as you're building your brand, you have 20 locations now. Like you're saying, no, we do want to have some consistency, where there's a certain expectation that a customer should have when they walk into a Craveworthy location, and we're gonna beat those expectations.
This has been my mantra since I walked in the door last year, and my team hears me say it all the time. I must say it, I don't know, 5, 10 times a day. The thing that I say all the time is like, we have to have just one way of doing things. And I say that from a technology perspective in particular, because our tech stack, as you can imagine, and acquiring 20 brands in such a short period of time it's a little messy, right? Like we've just now gotten to the point that Toast is implemented across all of our brands. We're solving that same problem when it comes to loyalty, because we work with 4 different loyalty partners right now. And we can't, as we scale and grow, we can't support an environment with a really short, small service model team. We can't support 6 different recipe systems across the business. We have to figure out what works for everybody. And we have to also allow the brands to be unique. So things like Gregory's Coffee or Fresh Brothers Pizza out in California, those are very different customer expectations of how that business operates. So we have to also allow for innovation in those brands. And I say this all the time to my team members too, the same way we would go into a brand and you wouldn't teach someone 2 different ways of preparing chicken, that you could do it this way or you could do it this way. You just teach them one way. It needs to be that same philosophy when it comes to tech.
So Chris, like over the past 20 years that you've been in the restaurant space, have you found a change in consumer expectations? And, even though you've not been at Craveworthy since COVID, but post-COVID, has there been an escalation in terms of what customers expect of the brands they love?
Oh, and it changes. I mean, in some brands, it changes so quickly too. I think back to COVID, and as restaurants were, especially in the Chicago market, as restaurants were getting ready to reopen, people were so concerned with physical contact. And so we created virtual menus, right? You scan a QR code and you bring it up on your phone. And people really felt attached to that in some of our more urban markets. And that lasted a very short period of time. And then suddenly, almost overnight, everyone was like, I don't want those. I don't want to look at something on my phone. I want a physical menu again. And now customer expectations change back. And I think the same thing is in third party. Third party feels very different right now today than it did 6 months or a year ago. And I don't know if that's consumer expectations are changing. People are being more conservative with their wallets, but I think a lot of us are feeling it. And so you have to stay in touch with what your customers are telling you, not what third parties or a vendor is telling you.
Yeah. As you look at the future, what bets are you making as a technology and marketing leader? Are there any bets you're making on what the future holds for restaurant brands, and what does consumer expectation look like then? Let's say 2 years from now, 5 years from now.
I will get out my crystal ball and try to make some educated guesses here. I think really focusing on smarter layouts for restaurant openings as we're continuing to open more locations. Better, and this is probably not unique to us, but continuing to drive better use of data. We have a lot of data at our fingertips, and making sure that we're focused on the ones that it can answer questions, not just data for novelty's sake, which I think happens quite a bit. And then continue a really strong execution on off-premise, both from catering and non-catering.
And what does the consumer of tomorrow look like? Like, do you think that how they interact with brands will evolve even more? Or will the split start to even out more in terms of in-room dining, third-party, drive-thrus? Like, where are you seeing it going?
I'm really curious if we're going to see a stronger deviation to more offline behaviors. And we're starting, there's even buzz about this in social media, where there's a lot of people that just feel a lack of authenticity when they engage with brands or even their friends on social media. And so there's people who are kind of giving up those things, or they're going out to dinner and they're having no phone dinners, right? Everyone just put their phone in the middle of the table and they can't be on it. And so I think that maybe I'm just hopeful in this, and that there's going to be more opportunity for stronger connection and less reliance on novelty or flair or virality. I think the core of what our customer will always continue to be is a strong focus on food and experience, and even a bit of entertainment, right? People are always looking to be entertained.
I love that, and I agree with it. Like just the other day, my wife and I were in a restaurant, and there was just a QR code for the menus, and we distinctly felt us looking at each other and going like, why is this still a thing? Like, I just want to look at a menu and, it's a fine dine restaurant and still feel like, I can hold and touch something and read versus like pulling up my phone again, because next thing you know, like an email distracts me and I'm like looking at my email with my wife looking at me and wondering like, why am I on my phone? Right. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's where the world is going, which is, consumers have high expectations of the brands that they love and they want experiences. And some of those experiences might be digital, but if it's too much and it's forced, then it starts to show up in like how consumers perceive you as a brand. And so I think every brand is going to have to adapt and evolve and just learn from their consumers and see what do they want. And to your point, if those expectations are evolving every 6 months, I think the restaurants that kind of keep their eyes and years on the prize will be the ones that actually make it. And the ones that just are stuck in their ways probably will struggle, right?
I think that was so perfectly summed up.
I love it. And Chris, for folks in our audience who are in leadership positions in the built environment functions, or folks that are just entering the restaurant space, what advice would you give to those two types of individuals in our audience?
Build from the inside out. It's the things that we've been doing in restaurants continue to be the same things. Focus on what you can do within your four walls first. Make sure that you're executing well. We talk a lot about this internally of not layering on marketing until we know that a brand is really functioning well internally and that food quality is great. Ticket times are really good, because the last thing we want to do is spend money on marketing to drive people into a broken system. So focus on those four walls, build from the inside out. I would say a couple of other pieces when it comes to off-premise catering to leverage. I tell this to everybody. I try to make sure it's the thing I focus on. If you're looking to grow your catering business, go talk to your local chamber of commerce. It might seem expensive to sign up for it. It is probably one of the most beneficial things you can do. Not every chamber of commerce is fantastic. I would say in my experience, 75 to 80% of them are, and they will drive business into your restaurant. They will help you build relationships in your community.
Wow, that is really, really interesting. Well, there you go. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly, truly appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. For folks in our audience who want to learn more about Craveworthy Brands or look you up and reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find. Christopher Gumprecht. Craveworthy Brands. We have our company website, which will have a list to connection to all of our brands on there as well. We're pretty much on every social channel too, so we're pretty easy to find.
There you go. Well, once again, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly appreciate it. And for all those in our audience, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you on the next episode of Elevating Brick and Mortar. That was Christopher Gumprecht from Craveworthy Brands. What stood out to me is how thoughtfully Chris connects marketing, technology, and operations to meet guests wherever they are, whether that's in-room dining, takeout, or catering. As restaurants navigate consumer expectations and talent shortages, conversations like this highlight how important it is to invest in people, simplify technology, and stay focused on delivering consistent, crave-worthy experiences. With that, I'm your host, Sid Shetty, and I'll see you on the next episode of Elevating Brick and Mortar.
Operations and facilities teams across industries rely on ServiceChannel to ensure that their locations provide the best possible guest experience. Keep customers coming back by lowering downtime and raising your brand standards. Visit ServiceChannel.com to learn more.